let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're continuing our series of dinner table talks. We've got a few guests with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves one by one.
Hi there, my name is Clayton, formerly grommrpile, but I am now known as One Big Snack on Instagram, Twitter, and all the other ones.
Hey, I'm Ben, beerbellybeardstache on Grommr, and Ben from Ogden on Instagram.
Hi there, I'm Zach. On Instagram, I am chubbysnowman2.
Hey, I'm Kevin, known as yattedchubzaddy on Instagram, Twitter, and all that fun stuff.
Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you all here with us today. And I think today is going to be, dinner table talks. It's a round table. We usually put out something to say it's going to be a great episode. And I do believe they are all great episodes. But I think the subject matter of today, I think it's really important. And it kind of harkens back to something, we talked about dysmorphia and dysphoria with a guest of ours in previous seasons, and obviously mental wellness and physical wellness are things that we often bring up on the pod, but I think today it's just going to be a great opportunity to really dig into some stuff that maybe some people in our spaces struggle to talk about and articulate, and hopefully the result is going to be a bit of a narrative that we can help to maybe build that conversation. So listen, y'all, let's just get straight into it. I want to ask, for everyone here, what is that kind of baseline understanding of things that are often referenced when it comes to larger bodies? So we're thinking things like, they call it reverse anorexia or bigorexia, or muscle dysmorphia and things like that.
I personally go by bigorexia, I guess. That's what I've always just called it, but that's because I'm in kind of the fitness realm as well.
I think the bigorexia manifests more for me, where it's sort of like you think you're smaller than you are. You look in the mirror, and instead of being anorexic, where you see the fat that you really don't have, the big folks, we don't see how big we really are. And for me, that manifested where I'd be with my ex, and I'd be pointing out these guys and be like, I want my gut to look like theirs, and then I'd have to be told that I'm actually already bigger than them, and I couldn't see it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you there. There are some guys, especially people I follow on social media, that I look at them like, oh my God, they look absolutely beautiful. I love their size. And then I open up their bio and I'm like, yeah, I'm 50 pounds heavier than them.
Yeah, it's funny because I've just recently discovered all this. I've only just known anorexia, not really bigorexia and everything. But when I look at myself compared to other people, I try not to. But it's hard not to try to, I guess. Because you look at photos on Instagram and, all social media, and then you compete and compare where you feel like you are bigger than other people. And then, you feel like you're not where you're supposed to be.
I do it all the damn time, and it's to my own detriment. Just I'm always going on and seeing people's progress and oh my God, they did it in 2 years, and here I am 5 years in, I still haven't gotten that big. And there's this, and I've said before about that twinge of jealousy that comes in, and I'm like, damn it, why not me? When's it my turn? But I know that, through the course of doing this podcast and having these conversations, it's you realize that 90% of it is genetics. So it is what it is. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen and in its own time frame. But damn it, if it's not frustrating to feel like you are just stuck in a body that will not comply with your wishes.
Right. I think there's certainly an importance there of acknowledging the genetic realities of what we're trying to do as gainers. People often reference this from the perspective of sports or any other kind of fitness, right? They look at people who they see to be wildly successful and they go, I want to hear what this person has to say because they are the person with the success. And the problem is the person who often has the most amount of success is not the person who's overcome struggles to get success. That's why they have the success. They didn't have to mount hurdles to get to it. They just kind of got there, you know. And it's no shade to people, of course, who have that genetic lottery ticket. God bless, do the best you can with it. How fabulous. But really does put the importance on, you know, if you are someone who is struggling with weight gain, centering voices that have experienced struggle in the way that you've experienced struggle, because those are people who are going to understand what your actual needs are, rather than the sort of melange of hoping that it might just sort of randomly happen and taking into account what needs to go on for yourself. But Kev, I love how you express that, you know, learning that the existence of things like bigorexia. I think bigorexia is a good term. You know, it's quite simple. You know, we understand anorexia, bigorexia kind of goes the opposite way. I like that you express it. It's a discovery for you, because it's that thing of, we sometimes don't consider potential pitfalls within gaining. We just kind of presume everyone's horny, having a good time. No one's told you that there could potentially be emotional and mental struggles in the pursuit of that journey. And so we don't think to consider that those things might be there. So again, reasons why I think this kind of conversation is important. But I want to put it to all of y'all, this idea of bigorexia, in your own words, how do you feel it differs from the desires of typical gaining?
I think for me, it's like, I don't know if I'll ever, like, in my mind, and I feel like I talk to a lot of people who are a lot heavier than me. I don't know if we'll ever reach that point of satisfaction, which is unfortunate. But in the grand scheme of things, it'll just mean we just continue to get bigger and bigger. But even like right now, I like, because I've been working out a little bit more, I feel super fit and I don't feel fat at all. And then this morning, I was looking in the mirror in my silhouette, and I'm like, I've now started formulating like this hourglass figure, which is fine, but I prefer like more of a chubby build. And so, because of my genetics being more geared towards losing weight, when I start working out, I start shaping up a ton. And then I dramatically feel less inclined to post for that matter, because when I post, I feel good about my body and I want to share it and like show it off. And then there have been like the past few weeks, I just haven't felt the need to, because I'm just like, I feel the same size. So it kind of gets to me. I didn't realize it got to me mentally until recently, where I'm just like, I don't feel the need to post, and I don't think anybody would be that excited to see it. So it's kind of sucks.
You're preaching to the choir, honey. That's the reason why sometimes it'll be weeks and weeks and weeks before I post something. And because let me, I start to feel like, oh God, they've seen me in this pose a million times. They've seen this damn backdrop a million times, because my bathroom's the only place with good lighting. It's like, I feel like people are going to get so sick of seeing the same thing that I feel totally like no reason to post anything. So like, I feel you on that one.
I know I am quite famous for like posting one time a month and then disappearing for God knows how long. So, and it is sort of that idea of like, I don't, I post when I feel good about myself and I want to share that. And then I find oftentimes that like I just get bored of my own like Instagram sometimes, if that makes sense.
No, I can definitely relate to that. Sometimes it's even the thought of, I feel good. I feel really big right now. And then, you know, I'm quick to whip out my phone and I'm trying to pull it at the right angle. And then I see myself and I'm like, oh, now I see myself from this angle. I'm less impressed. I'm less enthused. And it like cuts me down real quick. And sometimes I can catch myself and go, no, no, that's the wrong angle. We got to get up, find a new spot, turn, twist, crouch, do something to really give yourself the fantasy to get back into it for the mo. But it can really get you if you're not careful. The thing that brings us the most amount of access to the positive vibes, the posting of the photo where we can receive likes and comments and shares and all that other kind of wonderful stuff, suddenly becomes a place of trepidation, where we can suddenly start to question our own ability to assess what we're looking at. That moment that each of you all have really mentioned there, that comparativeness. Yeah.
I try to my best to remain positive on a lot of my posts, or just like I try to interact and talk to people a lot. I feel like I'm very social when it comes to like the gaming community and just in general, like just to get insights and how like people like feel about things, or like, you know, or you just get those like unwanted and solicited messages that I don't ask for. But for the most part, I try to really think about like the body positivity and it all. Like it's very hard to get those voices out of your head, like, like why are you doing this and is it worth keep going to do this? But like I enjoy it because obviously it's a turn on, but like more on the body positive side, I feel more comfortable than I've ever felt in my whole entire life now that I'm at a certain weight and chubby or muscular, either way, it's just the mental part about it. It does obviously affect your mental health a lot too, but remaining positive through it all, I try my best to like, just stay like on a nice rear course about it.
I think circling back to my last episode, I think that's also where I integrate why I yo-yo is because the need to feel constant change is something that I've always been drawn to. So I'm like, when I get very thin or very fit, I'm just like, ugh, my biceps look so small. So I'm like, let me just gain all this weight back, and then I go overboard in gaining, and I love it, but I'm also like, well, now my biceps are fat. So it's like a very weird like conundrum to be stuck in. I'm just like, when will I ever be happy with how I look?
When I think about the way that I experience it, and talking about grommrpile's observation about getting smaller and then not liking one's body, I think back in like 2020 when I got down to about 207, I was obviously hiking and skiing better than I was for a long time, but I didn't like how my body looked and felt anymore. And then just did the yo-yo on my own as well. I think the way I also experience it is just wanting to get bigger, but then now I'm to the point where like I'm outgrowing these mainland clothes stores and maybe having to start shopping at big and tall stores. There's that balance of wanting to look how you want, but also wanting to be able to wear like cute clothes and stuff. I'm kind of staying put for a minute actually, which feels weird to embrace more of the kind of fantasy side of gaming than actually really trying to gain.
I think a lot of what's getting brought up here is very, very indicative of how I think a lot of us fall into common tropes and hang-ups with gaming, right? And I think, yeah, we accept that there is a normalcy to, well, sometimes we hit plateaus with weight, and so we end up maintaining for natural reasons, or, we've got our personal reasons, like you were just saying, Ben, the not wanting to push ourselves too far because we want to fit into clothes, or mentioning again like the intentional yo-yoing and how that might help us to navigate some of those conundrums. But I think this is the moment that's really important to look at dysphoria alongside this idea of the dysmorphia. And we covered this in that original episode, dysphoria and dysmorphia, where the difference is essentially that dysphoria is looking at yourself and just feeling dissatisfied with what you see and deciding I'm going to change this to be more in line with a body that would grant me euphoria. So I feel joy about that. Dysmorphia is the inability to accurately perceive yourself as you are. And I think a lot of us do have that. We were mentioning before, Zach, you had said, oh, I see other people that I go, oh, they're so huge. They're enormous. I love how they look. And then you click on their profile and they're 50 pounds lighter than you. And it's a moment of going, do I understand how fat I am? Do I truly actually see myself? And I do think sometimes it comes across a little worrying when people express a sense of, I still feel so skinny. And you see them weighing in at 400 plus pounds, and sometimes you think maybe that's a trope. Maybe we're having a little tee-hee moment, because obviously we know that they're not skinny. But then sometimes you wonder, is there a little more to that? And how, as you say, Clayton, how frustrating to think, wow, we will never feel maybe satisfied on this growth journey. And I think some of us are less inclined towards a specific goal and more just to the vagueness of what will be, will be. We'll see how far we can push this. We'll see what happens. And I think there can be a lot of joy in that. But just putting that out there with this idea of dysphoria, along with dysmorphia, I want to ask each of you, do you feel like if you were to observe yourself right now, you would be able to really cleanly determine whether that's what you're experiencing, either the dysphoria or dysmorphia? Or is it maybe a little confused? Maybe you're not quite certain.
I would say I'm not certain. I think I am completely capable of like recognizing this is the body I want. Like I'm happy with how it is, but I would prefer and be happier if it was bigger than it is. So I don't know if that's dysphoria or dysmorphia, but that's how I feel. And then speaking back to one of his points is like the clothes shopping. For me, I didn't start buying like XL or 2X size clothes until recently, and I didn't even realize that they fit me well. I was like wearing my old underwear from like forever long ago, and they were like mediums or I actually grew out of smalls. I can't be comfortable in smalls anymore, but when I was wearing, like, I bought all these XLs from Costco, and I was like, oh, these are really comfortable. These are a lot more comfortable than, current underwear I'm wearing right now. So it's definitely something that I've had to like understand. I'm like, oh, my body's bigger, so bigger clothes are what I need. And I'm used to wearing like mediums and smalls, and I've grown out of both of those. So now it's like I'm used to being in larges, and larges I've already kind of grown out of. So it's very hard to track where my body is at, and it's really hard for me to conceptualize that I'm actually that big.
That's why we hold on to all of the clothes that we've outgrown because we're like, at some point, I can bust myself out of this, and that's going to turn me on.
Yeah.
I mean, on the point of clothing, actually, that brings up a very interesting point because a lot of people will note, you might in your mind go, "Oh, I fit into large currently," but depending on the brand, you might fit into another brand's medium, and then another brand's 2XL, and then you factor in things like if it's XLT or just XL long, and you're like, I need a piece of fabric that fits me and looks good, and everyone's using a different metric. And so I think that uh, there are a lot of things within society that really don't help us to feel grounded in really being able to accurately perceive ourselves for the size that we are.
I feel like that's why measuring turns me on, where like the measuring tape doesn't lie. My perspective in the mirror might mess with my head. The photos that people take might be from a different candid angle that may or may not make me look chunky, but that measuring tape says it, and I think that's what makes it exciting.
Going just sort of back to the question at hand, and then I also have another tangent about buying clothes too, because that's a nightmare. But the question at hand, my dysphoria is kind of tied hand in hand with my like gender identity. I identify as trans, I'm non-binary, and so I know that like my body doesn't quite fit like my own personal goals that matches my gender, and I still get like I get misgendered every single day. I get called sir, I get called he him like all day and night, even from people who I'm like actually close with, like some of my friends, and like it's really difficult to be in a place where you are comfortable with your body while also being like told you look like a man 24/7.
On the point of gender, that's actually a really interesting point. I forget who wrote the piece, but essentially there is the idea that fat is actually the great gender equalizer.
Mhm.
Because at a certain size, man, woman, whoever, it all look the same. Because at a certain weight, everybody got titties, everybody got rolls, all the bits are covered. So it's sort of like outside of perhaps a few stereotypical ideas of gendered beauty, you don't quite know what you're looking at. So actually, there is an idea that fat is both a neutralizer of the male and female, but also the propagation of true gender neutrality. That it kind of uplifts everyone quite equally and centers non-traditional bodies, which I think is very interesting. But also expectations of gender within size, within presentation, and again, back to clothing, that thing of how we dress and present and represent ourselves, how we understand ourselves is not just a decision, it is what is reflected back at us. We put ourselves out there, but we are also reflected in return. And I think that there is a lot of interest there.
I would probably say like, the confusing of both because obviously I like being bigger and the difference between the sizes of like bigger and smaller. But yeah, it definitely wraps into what like the clothing, of course, topic, because I just recently bought like Taylor Swift merch, and it was literally a 2X instead of like just regular XL. And like at a certain point, I was like, is this real? Like, I can't believe this is really happening. Like, I'm actually going up in shirt sizes, my pants waist, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is a bit confusing to say the least.
I really appreciate this conversation. I think there's a lot here to really dig through, and about how for each of you there's little avenues in which you experience that sense of dysphoria and dysmorphia, how it manifests, what those triggers can look like. And I think the diversity even within this conversation today is important for listeners, because I think for some people who maybe, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's no conversation about dysmorphia and dysphoria in our community. And so even if this is the first time someone's hearing about it, I think the initial takeaway is there are a lot of things that could lead to that eventuality for someone. And it is important to, yes, hold space to hear people and what they have to say, but also for listeners to consider there are many avenues through which one might start to feel dysmorphic rather than dysphoric. And we need to be cognizant of that and reflect again the importance of community and why we do these conversations, because we all need to be here to ironically weigh in and give support to one another. And to that point, I do want to ask and put this to the group, if anyone feels comfortable to share, has anyone here either been formally diagnosed with or experienced maybe a form of more traditional disordered eating, that sense of anorexia or bulimia in their past?
I have never been like diagnosed with any sort of eating disorders, but I had a lot of problems with like specifically body dysmorphia back in high school. And I was like, if you look at me, like pictures of me back in high school, it was Twink City all day long. But I remember like watching TV shows like Biggest Loser and stuff like that, and stepping on the scale and being like, wow, like I'm 160 pounds, but I still feel like 50 pounds overweight compared to all these people on TV and stuff. And gaining weight really helped me kind of break out of those like really toxic ideas of what society says our body should be.
Yeah, I mean, I was never diagnosed, but I guess I had like this type of like anorexia type of deal. I guess it was more like a mental thing. I didn't really like eating in front of people, or I don't know if it's just because I just didn't force myself. I waited to eat by myself if it was at night, or if it was like real early in the morning, or just like avoiding parents or siblings, because like I don't know, I just didn't like to eat in front of people, and I've never understood why. It was just like a thing for me, I guess. But like even like now, say if I put a video up on OnlyFans of me eating, I don't know how to, I don't know, interact.
I haven't been diagnosed with eating disorder, but talking about this made me go and consult the DSM-5. So the kind of the clinical aspect of like how would one actually even say that somebody has eating disorder? Because I was really curious, like what do the professionals say? And as I was reading about bulimia, and like I get this last point where it's talking about self-evaluation is unduly influenced by body shape and weight. And at the very beginning of that, it was talking about recurrent episodes of binge eating. And I was like, oh shit, like, okay, I guess I can see this being something close. And then, looking at binge eating disorders, I was like, okay, maybe I do some of these things when I'm actually actively gaining, when I'm having more snacks than I would otherwise have, or when I'm cleaning the plate when I'm already full, or when I'm overeating and dealing with the consequences after the fact. I think those things make it sound like maybe I do some disordered eating at times, but I don't want folks to feel like shame from listening to the pod about hearing about disordered eating.
No, but like that's why we want to ask the question, right? Like, as you say, you haven't been diagnosed with anything, but also instead of just sitting there and being like, I think I have this, end of story, you like consulted the best resource you would have available to you to find out on your own accord. And you're being cognizant of that. You've also shared with people like a point that maybe some people will resonate with. Like I was saying before, because we don't have these conversations in our community, I think for the most part, if there are people who are struggling with disordered eating or bigorexia or any of these things, we aren't gonna know about it, and most people aren't gonna pick up on it because we may very well just look at it and go, oh, they're just overeating because they're gaining, and then not think elsewise about it. I mean, Tim, to rope you into this, as a nurse, and I know you're not like a mental health nurse,
No,
but like,
or a nutritionist.
but what is your like training slash knowledge slash experience when it comes to, people you may have encountered that have struggled with disordered eating?
I'm not like they don't exactly teach you warning signs or anything like that. And when it comes to being a nurse, if you say you have a patient who has an actual eating disorder and they're in the hospital for whatever reason, you're looking at physical signs. You're looking for like symptoms of things that could be going wrong because of their disordered eating process. But there's no warning signs that they teach you, oh, look out for this person or that person doing this. What I would honestly like is someone please define to me what is a completely healthy relationship with food. Does that mean that you only eat when you're hungry and you stop when you're full and you never snack and you don't indulge in sugar and blah, blah, blah? Because I don't know a single person in my adult life that is a totally clean eater.
I mean, that brings up an interesting point around like intuitive eating, which is a big push a lot these days, especially with people who don't necessarily brand themselves as dietitians, but people who are trying to like uh, help on that journey of repairing one's relationship with food. And again, we're talking about all of us living in a culture and a society that is systemically fat phobic. So none of us are truly eschewed of any food trauma or any biases that we may have towards certain types of food and where we access it and how much we can eat, right? And sometimes, again, I do feel like gainer culture just kind of relies either on the trope itself or the automatic inverse to kind of inform like why we do what we do. Like we know that people avoid certain foods in order to diet to lose weight, so we just decide, okay, we have to double down on all of those foods in order to gain weight. Not necessarily taking into account gainers who might be lactose intolerant, or even just people who, for their own reasons, don't want to subsist off of junk food and then sit there and go, hello, can I have a gainer shake recipe that isn't like 3 cups of vegetable oil?
I feel like it's really hard in today's society to really identify what disordered eating is because the definition keeps evolving and changing, as does most science and scientific words. Because on like subscription-based services, you can't feed each other because that is considered disordered eating. I'm not sure if that's just like something they threw up just to kind of kill feeder content or what the situation is with that. So according to society, everything we do overeating is disordered eating. I would say my biggest disordered eating that I personally like feel and I kind of hate it is it's intermittent fasting, I guess, in the morning. I will have to force myself to eat breakfast because I could go until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon before I need to actually eat, just because I'm either too lazy to get up or I just don't feel like it. So I'll just sit there and my stomach will be growling for like ever. And I'm just like, oh, I finally feel like getting up. So I feel like that's definitely been detrimental to like keeping the weight on and gaining. And so I have to kind of like force myself to get out of that habit.
I can't believe how much we have in common because that's pretty much my situation.
Yeah.
No, I'm the exact same way. Okay. So when I was a kid, I was in therapy, and my therapist was like, you just need to eat breakfast and then you'll feel better. Plot twist, that didn't work. But basically, I ate breakfast every single day, and I got so sick of it that I don't think I've like I hate eating breakfast now. Like actual and like it's specifically like breakfast food, but like now I will actually need to like force myself to eat something when I wake up at like 9 in the morning. And a lot of the times I'll just like grab like a boost shake and chug that down and head out for the day.
I mean, I was one of five kids growing up, so I mean, for me, breakfast was never like a full plate. It was very much boxes of whatever was available, and then that was it. And when it came to dinner, like you got what you got on your plate, and if there was ever leftovers, like because it was just whatever was left on like the big plate in the middle, it would always be whoever ate their food first to get it, and I was never that kid. I was very scrawny for all of my life, so I think much to that conversation point, it's interesting how much, even in families and growing up, there is this bias towards, we'll just eat this way because this is how everyone else does their thing. So it'll work for you because it should work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, then I got nothing, because secretly no one actually has the answers, right? We just like to kind of bandy things about with a band-aid solution. Oh, you just need this. That'll sort you, Zach. Get over it. It's very that old way of thinking, like, oh, is arm cut off at the joint? Put a band-aid on it. Harden up, Prince. Very, very that ridiculous way of just going, I don't actually want to talk about or address this subject. I just want you to stop complaining, right?
But it happens in this community too. Because how many times of like, you may open up to someone and be like, oh, I'm not maintaining my consistency. Like like someday I might, consume 4,000 calories, but then the very next day I'm only consuming 900, because of whatever situation's going on. And people can like there is this I guess stock answer, well, just keep eating. Just eat. Why aren't you eating? Eat right now. And it's like, no, dude, like I wish that I was just a garbage disposal, but I'm not.
I want to ask something that may be pushing slightly onto the more controversial side of things. I want to ask if anyone here feels like, do you feel that elements of your gaining journey are tangled up in these elements of dysmorphia? Like I said, with dysphoria, that just being able to assess yourself and be dissatisfied and saying, oh, I want to change that. I think that's all of us, hence we go on the gaining journey. But I want to ask very specifically if anyone feels like elements of their gaining journey, practices, experiences, are maybe a little tangled up in dysmorphia itself.
I definitely think so. I think I probably wouldn't have gained quite as far as I did if I was able to more accurately assess how big I was. I mean, there's no regrets. Obviously, I think that I really like my body. It's just I probably would have waited a little bit longer to get to this size.
So with my gaining journey, I want to say gaining is not like a sexual experience for me, and I feel like I'm a big like outlier in the community where like gaining is all about like the inherent like I don't know, horniness or like kink of it. And as someone who is like I feel like my gaining journey is, as you said, Jay, before, this sort of like great equalizer when it comes to gender. I definitely think that like my gaining journey has been more so tied to my gender identity and where I want to get in terms of my gender identity, more so than it is like the sexual experience of it.
I don't think I actually, for a long time, realized how much maybe it has to do with my self-worth. And have always questioned since I was like younger. It was like, why am I doing this? Why was I drawn to this? And I think it has something to do with self-worth because when I was a kid, I felt like I was told like all my life, just eat more and you're too skinny and this, that, and the third. So I've always like, I guess in another way to maybe be a part of the heterosexual society was just to be that like maybe bodybuilder looking type or be the football player, the rugby player body type. And now I've realized it's less to be like heterosexuals and more to be the fact that I think this is what turns me on. This is what I'm sexually attracted to. And I find it really hot looking. So I think that's majority of it. But for me, it's like it's really hard to like understand if it's just because it's fat or if it's because it's the size. I can't tell because fat turns me on more than anything. So I think I'd rather be like way fatter than I am right now, but I also like the aesthetic of how I look. So it's very hard to like rationalize what's correct in my mind.
For me, I try to, like I said, remain positive about it, because this is the biggest I've ever been. I've always fluctuated with my weight from the past, I guess, my whole gaining journey from the start of 2017 till now. but just feeling good about myself and just not comparing and competing with others. The dysmorphia of it all, it can really get to you. Like, it is a sexual turn on. It is very fun to be bigger and compare sizes and all that, but like it really does get to you at the end of the day too.
Yeah, I want to come back to something Zach said about, gaining being a fulfillment of gender. And this is something I've spoken to trans friends about. There is definitely a kinship between the trans journey and the gaining journey. There is a sense of looking in the mirror, feeling a dissatisfaction with the silhouette or personhood, shall we say, that looks back at you. And so you take measures to adjust that thing to be more reflective of the person that you see within yourself. For people who are trans, some people who are non-binary, they take hormones. For gainers, we take donuts. We take the thing that we need to get to the body that we need to have. And I love that for a lot of this, we're referencing, yes, gaining can be sexual, but also gaining can take us beyond that. The fulfillment of our body and our journey is not just, oh, this turns me on. There is a human experience at the end of that and throughout that process as well. And sometimes I think when we lose ourselves a little bit in the accolades from others, Ben, you had mentioned if people hadn't maybe encouraged you and pushed you a little bit to grow, you maybe wouldn't have gotten there so big so quickly. And it's that thing of, if some of us feel more particular, like, oh, in a vacuum, maybe I would have taken this approach to my body. It is good to be cognizant that sometimes the influence from others maybe does succeed in helping us to grow, but also maybe places an expectation on us to perform growth as well. We've referenced out on the podcast that certain people in the community have been open about lying about the numbers, fudging the figures, because there is this expectation of you to grow. How can you possibly be a gainer if you're not going to grow? I don't want to support you if you're not going to grow. I won't talk to you if you're not actively trying. If I don't see results, how dare you? And that expectation does not care about your genetics, about your financial situation, about your personal desire to continue to grow or pivot or do something different. And so all of that, I think, can start to wrap this notion of, we maybe get put in a bit of a corner where we feel like we don't have an option except to participate in the growth journey, whether or not there's any legitimacy to it, whether or not we're enjoying ourselves. And I think that brings me to a point that I want to ask next. Do any of y'all feel that there are like tropes and trends within the gainer community that maybe begin to lean a little bit more towards the dysmorphic side of things? As in, if we participate in this trend, or if we tell this person this thing, there is a chance that that might push them a little bit in the dysmorphic direction.
I don't know that people, I mean, if it's an outside perspective judging your body, I don't think people even care, to be honest. Like, I don't think the people that are making the requests that they do care anything about you, really. And it's kind of sad, because you want to feel like this is a community where, people, love and support your journey and are here to be a friend. But there are people that are like, I want you to pick up smoking. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, I want you to die and stuff like that. So that's where it's just like, it's a little bit too much for me, where you detach and you just have like no concept of the reality that everyone else lives in. You're living in your own reality. You have your whole fantasy on this website, and you think that these people are objects that you can just control and contort. And I feel like that's why, I'm so vocal about it. And that's why I honestly, like, a lot of times people ask my weight all the time. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. And it's not necessarily because I don't want to share it. It's just like, it's very frustrating, because when I think about the number, it's not where I want it to be, and it's not where you're going to want it to be. So you're just going to be disappointed, and I'm going to be disappointed. So it's like, what the hell did we share that for?
Yeah, I totally feel that.
I completely agree. Especially when you're running like an account on social media, on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Grommr, on whatever social media platforms that, you make content on, you have hundreds to thousands of followers, but like, how many of those people like actually care about you on a deeper level than just what you look? And it might even be a small handful, but we have an understanding that what makes me uncomfortable and what makes them uncomfortable, and we don't go in pushing each other's boundaries because we're friends. We're not, we connect on a level that extends beyond just like the fantasy of gaming.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like it's annoying to know that just like it's always just about the sexual part of it, and it's not about like what we're actually having good conversations on. It's not more past like the looks, than the weight, than why aren't you eating bigger, like all that kind of stuff. I don't know, just those high expectations of the people that actually like everyone else is saying, like just doesn't care what you're putting out there. Is that what you're actually like worth? I mean, throughout the journey, I met like a few good people along the way, like including you guys, like doing this podcast right now. There's some people that I still continue to talk to, and not even in a sexual way, just a casual everyday messaging. Like it's just nice to know that there's people in this community that you can actually like trust and talk to, and not feel let your guard down, be vulnerable with.
I really appreciate that, mentioning that there are people that you can trust. And I think it's important to come back to, Clayton, you'd mentioned that element of community. Sometimes there is a frankness where we do have to address that a lot of the people that we might engage with aren't too concerned with the human behind all of this. And maybe we need to be more willing to kind of put that person in the category of, okay, you're going to be like that. That's going to be what that is. I have to learn to live with that, because we can't snap our fingers and make people sit up and pay some proper respect. We have to appreciate that there are some people who are just going to do what they're going to do, and that's going to be that. But to the people who do give, and they hold space, and they listen, and they truly give a fuck, like, I think there has to be more of an element to which some of us have to hold on to that a bit more tightly, because it's not as common as you might think. And I think those are the moments that are going to help us move through these struggles the most. When I think about trends that might end up pushing people towards, dysmorphic actions, I think about things that are just inherently dehumanizing. I have a personal gripe with comparison stories. Which gainer do you like best, left or right? Who's going to get more votes? I fucking hate that. Just yeah, pull up two gainers, and let's tell one person that they're great and the other person that they're not shit. Let's take all of their life efforts, the thing that matters most to them in this world, and let's just take a big fat shit on top of that. Like, nah, not a fan of that whatsoever. Even little things like, oh, who are your top 3 favorite gainers? That's such an annoying question, yo. Like, if I follow you, right? You're a gainer that I like. You're a person that I like. I'm following you. I'm trying to support you and engage with your shit, right? Like, creating a space in which people feel like, oh, there are certain gainers that are to be liked. What do these people have in common? What don't I have? Why was I not included on this list? What does it all mean? What is this big story, cabal going on that I then get in my head about that makes me think I need to squirrel away and work harder? But what do you mean you need to work harder? Like, no one's paying you to do this. And no matter what amount of money you're making on your OnlyFans, you're probably not being paid enough to pay your rent and your bills. So, like, no one's paying you enough. For the most part. For most people, shall we say. So I don't know. I feel like maybe there needs to be a little bit more, like, revisiting these tropes and trends, and maybe thinking, like, does this serve me to participate in this? Do I genuinely feel buoyed and uplifted to do the thing? Or does it maybe threaten to take away if I don't get the answer that I want, right?
I think it's definitely a blow to some egos too, because I mean, I don't consider myself popular, but I think I'm popular enough. And when I don't see my name on those lists, I'm like, what the hell? And so I feel like if I feel that way, God forbid anybody else that I support and I'm like their biggest cheerleader, like I definitely do pay it forward. And there are many guys that just don't even know how much that I appreciate them. And I make sure to tell them all the time, because I know what it's like to not get that appreciation all the time. So I like to pay it forward and share, you're amazing, you look beautiful, you're doing great. Like, make sure you're, doing the best for your health. Don't like let people force you into stuff that you don't want to be in, because there's some people that I see that are in a relationship or some sort of relationship with an encourager, and the person doesn't necessarily look the happiest, and I'm concerned, but I don't want to ask those questions because I feel like that's very intrusive. So hopefully by saying this publicly on this platform, those people that have those silent battles that you feel like a little bit too judgy to jump into that situation can at least hear that there are people out there that do care about you and want to make sure that you're happy, and you're not just doing this out of obligation for an encourager or obligation for your OnlyFans or your Patreon, and you're actually doing it because it's what you enjoy. Because that would be horrible if somebody's like being forced into something. I couldn't imagine like consuming all the sugar that some of these people do. I'm very much against sugar for the most part, just because diabetes runs in my family, so I'm super like afraid of that. So I would hate to be, forced in a situation where like I'm chugging ice cream every day.
I think sometimes when I post a trope that might force or push me towards a more dysmorphic state would be when people, even though I'm showing off gain, are talking about some late stage, far bigger gain than I've already achieved. And, that kind of feels like it's somehow not good enough, not big enough, or kind of like negging him on size, saying you're not even that big or stuff like that. Like, ugh, gross.
I think my final statement would be more of like what I was saying in general, just to the audience out there, that if you feel a certain way about yourself and you're comparing yourself to other people, just know that there are people that you can trust to reach out to and just share how you're feeling, even if it's something like completely side of sexual, because I know that's what most people are like, oh, I only want to talk about sexual stuff. So if there is anything mentally that's going on, financially that's going on, I'm definitely somebody you could reach out to just to, have a conversation with, because I love to talk, obviously.
I think one thing I wanted to circle back to was just talking about these clinical terms. I don't want folks that just are, turned on by gaming, and that are chasing the positive and that things are all going good to feel bad about chasing this very intensely validating thing. But for folks that are, struggling and they feel like they're losing control of how they're gaining, how they're eating, and it's not in like a hot sexual way, that like, okay, maybe in that case, yeah, you can reach out to friends or professionals for help. But I don't want folks to come away feeling like every gainer has an eating disorder and we should all get help, because I've been in that place before where people try to self-diagnose and say, hey, what's wrong with you that you think this is hot?
Yeah, I think Clayton mentioned this before. Like, it's a good thing for us to question how much of this comes from something that people whose job it is to know the best about this has actually gone in and assessed that these things are a potential, and how much of this is just people projecting a sense of fat phobia on the concept of like people being fat and happy. But again, I think this is where these conversations are important and nuanced, right? Like, we're not saying that, of course, the notion of gaining itself is dysmorphic and bad for you, but it is also acknowledging that when you feel down because gaining isn't going your way or because of tropes, then too much of the bad stuff can lead to us being in a cycle of the bad stuff. And so, however that needs to be termed or manifest, it's good for us to hold each other to account when we see people promoting things that maybe push a more negative approach, shall we say, to the ideas of gaining. And also, like Clayton put themselves out there saying like, hey, talk to me and be open. And I would hope that, enough people in this community have like their small circle of friends that people could be like open with one another if they really are struggling and being like, hey, I'm not certain. But just like what you said, Ben, if people are genuinely struggling, also acknowledging that, hey, maybe I need to go and speak to a profesh about this and need to be open and honest. Like, what are these struggles? What is on my spirit regards this thing?
Gaining can be a very, very positive experience. And, if you are experiencing like a lot of anxieties about the way you looks, and even if you don't think that it's a big deal, always reach out, because there's always going to be people who either can help, can listen or can just sort of relate to you on a personable level?
For me, I do enjoy talking to people. I do enjoy interacting, talking to people on any type of social media, but just overall, do it how you want to do it. There's no rush. You're not doing it for anybody. You're not getting paid to do it. Like, just do it for yourself.
This has been a fantastic episode, and I think there's been a lot of great truths and a lot of great perspectives thrown in today. I just want to ask here, as a sort of last place to end things on, and maybe on a bit more of a, a bit of an uplifting note, for yourselves, when you feel like you are having a bit of a down moment, maybe you are in the struggle a little bit regarding your body, regarding this journey, all of those things, what is your sort of go-to thing that helps to lift you up out of that?
I think for me is like I've always been told since I was like born, even outside of gaining, that I say too much and I share too much, which I am not ashamed to. People seem to think there's a certain level of tact and not sharing everything and not being completely open and you lose mystery. But when I am feeling down, I do just share how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, and I feel like that's even refreshing for some people because I think people admire that to a degree. Like if you are willing to be as open as you are, I'm going to do that myself. I'm going to explore, how I'm feeling and verbalizing what you're feeling, because it's one thing to internally think it, but when you verbalize it, it's out there. You're like, oh, this has a different feeling, and you hear people's perspective on what you're feeling. Like the other day, I was like, my legs go numb now that I'm heavier, and I was like, is that normal? And I would not have known if I didn't just reach out to the community. I mean, I could have asked a professional, obviously, but it's a lot quicker to not have to book an appointment and go to the doctor and say, oh yeah, it's normal. You're sitting on your nerve endings because your body's heavier. So that kind of thing. Very, very open to share, my entire journey, not just the parts that I want people to see and hear.
I mean, like I said earlier, I'm quite famous for posting something, being on social media for like a day a week, and then taking a break. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, if something's not bringing me joy anymore, it is totally okay to just step back for a little bit and just sort of reassess your own self. You don't need to be performative 100% of the time. And it's very actually very unhealthy to be performative and in that kind of performative state most of the time. So like for me, just like taking that step back and just sort of like getting opportunities to unwind outside of the world of gaining has actually helped me appreciate my own gaining journey.
I think for myself, I do a lot of journaling, a lot of writing to myself. I feel like talking to yourself is not as crazy as it sounds like. I do a lot of mental self-care, whether that's like just like playing video games or just journaling, painting, anything that makes me feel comfortable and happy, even if it's just taking a break from social media, as you were saying, just thinking about yourself, doing the things that you need for yourself to take care of yourself.
For me, when I want to get back up again, I might get outside, maybe go for a walk and maybe take some belly selfies out in the woods, who knows? Or go engage with a friend, and whether that's go and get a coffee or a beer or something like that, and just talking about things, and you should feel better after that.
And to that point, I think Tim, you mentioned earlier, like feeling a bit run down with certain angles and locales. Out in the woods, finding a new locale to be in that makes you feel a little bit uplifted, and finding opportunities to try some new angles in such places. I feel like all of this, comes down to finding opportunities to reframe and re-angle, taking yourself out of the moment of the Maya and really looking at something else. For me, my contribution there would be investing in friends. The number one trick I have if I'm actually having a bit of a downer day is I message friends immediately and I want to know how they're doing. And if they are needing love and attention at the moment, I love on them. And the biggest contributor there is it's essentially gratitude, right? Like it's practicing gratitude and saying, okay, I'm in this moment, I'm not feeling great. Take myself out of my own moment, put it into someone else and say, what can I do for them? How can I invest? And I'm thinking to myself in the moment, oh, I need some love. How do I get the love that I need? Well, hold on. If I know that I need love, I know what that looks like. Maybe I should go and find someone to give that to. And if I'm investing some good with someone else, there will be some good that comes back to me. Maybe it seems a little counterintuitive, but it's a great way to get yourself out of that. Tim, what about for you?
When I figure out a way to bring myself out of a plateau depression, I'll let you know. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but to be fair, I've had a lot go on in the last couple of years. So I'm kind of like I think I'm trying to work past a particular blockage in my life at the moment that once I've gotten that a little bit cleared up, the other things might start to fall in line.
But y'all, this has been an incredible episode. I think there's a lot to be taken away from here. And to any listeners, I know we've said this for a number of different episodes, but let it be said here again, very plainly, we don't hold these conversations to pretend like this is the beginning, middle, and end of everything. This is truly the beginning of a snippet of several perspectives, journeys, and at different points. So I hope this episode encourages people to know that you're not alone in your experiences, that there is more to the story than what you just have to live and put up with, and in fact that there is a community of people willing to hold space, have conversation, and be supportive of you. So I hope that listening to this helps you to feel a little bit lighter and a little less alone in all of that. But I want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of our fantastic guests today. It was such a pleasure. And I'm going to ask each of you where our listeners can find you online.
So you can mostly find me under One Big Snack on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr, or minus the one and just Big Snack. So either one of those.
You can find me on Grommr at beerbellybeardstache and Instagram as Ben from Ogden.
You can find me over on the Instagrams at chubbysnowman2.
You can find me on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, yattedchubzaddy.
Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today. But that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccMouse. You can look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thicc.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Clayton.
Our theme song is provided by Clayton.